So we're here in St. Louis, specifically Ferguson, with the Reverend Vita Mccalister and Matt Berryman, who is the Executive Director of Reconciling Ministries Network. Vita Mccalister is with the United Church of Christ, specifically
I am the Associate Conference Minister for Leadership and Vitality in the Connecticut Conference of the UCC.
So, you understand United Methodist Church. You were ordained clergy in the United Methodist Church, correct?
Yes.
And now you're with the UCC Church.
Yes.
And you understand the mission of Reconciling Ministries Network. So can you say a little bit share with those who are looking a little bit about your connection with United Methodist Church and how you understand the ministry, Reconciling Ministries? Let's set that.
Absolutely. So I joined the United Methodist Church while I was in college, was drawn to the church because of its love for justice and its gospel preaching. I was in a small community in Battle Creek, Michigan. We were on the ground doing work on the opposite side of the tracks from the Kellogg Foundation. So in a community that had significant wealth and access on one side, and on the other side, abject poverty, an unemployment rate of over 50% in the African American community. And right in the heart of that town was the Washington Heights United Methodist Church, congregation and a 501c3 rated community ministry. And I fell in love. This is a church, I want to be a part of this church. If I'm going to be ordained, this is the church I want to be ordained in. African American church, great congregation, great people. The only problem was I came to that church as a woman who was struggling with her sense of identity and what it meant to be gay and Christian and called at the same time. And what drew me to the church was in the United Methodist Church, I found the first church at the time, this is 20 years ago, that was having open conversation around what it meant to be homosexual and Christian. Right, so I had grown up in the Baptist church where we couldn't even have dialogue.
Right,
okay, we couldn't even say nothing on it. And so to be in a space where there was an actual study, right? Remember we used to have study, have a little study on it, you know, y'all produced books, you know what I mean? And because of the polity of the United Methodist Church, a bishop, a district superintendent could require, we're going to go through this study. And folks had to do that. So for me, the use of the polity to engage congregations in a conversation for many that was tense and difficult, I thought was powerful. And number two, the use of the judicatory to produce resources and disseminate resources to encourage and equip congregations to have difficult conversations was powerful and transformative. So for me, I was like, this is my church. I want to be a part of this church. But as I came closer to understanding myself as a same-gender loving woman, that same church that I found to be liberative, you know, and right on the edge of things, all of a sudden became incredibly stifling. And when that dialogue led to some conclusions, which dialogues do, then we didn't have a recourse for anything else. And so I found myself saying, you know, in my lifetime, I have walked down the street and had somebody scream out the window and call me a nigger. And it devastated my soul. In my lifetime, I have been in the context of a conversation with someone and had them call me bitch, and it devastated my soul. I've been in a dialogue with someone, a family member, and it started to go another way, and they screamed out dyke so that it could be heard in the community, and it devastated my soul. And in neither of those instances did that devastation feel different. It was equally devastating, whether what was being played upon were the tropes of race, or the tropes of patriarchy, or the tropes of homophobia. The devastation was the same. So for those folks who suggest that we can dissect oppression, and that somehow the impact of patriarchy is more problematic and therefore we should focus our attention on that, or the impact of homophobia is more problematic and therefore we should focus our energy on that, or the impact of racism is more problematic and therefore we should focus our energies in that, I think you missed the whole point of how oppression works, right? The margins, who's on the margins change, but the way we treat people on the margins is the same. And that is that we allow people on the margins to believe that they are not created divinely in the image of God. And we allow them to believe that they don't have an inherent right, not a civil right, but an inherent and divine right to human dignity and decency. And that's a problem. And the church ought to be the first people to say, that's a problem.
So Meg, you may want to say a few words about why we are here as Reconciling Ministries with regard to what what Vita just said, these kind of intersections of oppression.
Yeah, growing up myself in the South as a Southerner, white gay male, I can relate a lot to your experience when you say that being called those epithets feels soul destroying. My experience is very different, but on the other hand, those moments were steady and began from an early age, hearing things like faggot, sissy boy, etc. I can't even remember them all because I probably blocked them out. And somewhere along the line, I intuitively, without having any way to sort of articulate it or put language on it, had an affinity for persons who were not necessarily gay. But I had an affinity early on for other marginalized persons, and I didn't know why. But I felt a sort of gravitas between us that I could not sort of put words to. And, later acquired, and still acquire in an ongoing way, those sort of deeper identifying features of what it means to be marginalized, the differences, as well as the places of convergence. And so, at Reconciling Ministries Network, it's been an organization for a long time now, 30 years, and has been in a largely white church and a largely white movement for LGBTQ sort of liberation and inclusion within the church, as has been the queer movement as a whole. Thank goodness now it's beginning to move in a more sort of intersectional movement, broader movement-based approach. But it has occurred to me over the years, first in that inclination, and didn't have language to parse it out, figure it out. But then increasingly, as I began to read and understand and have conversations and do a lot of listening, I began to see where those points of convergence were, and I could put some language on it. I think, RMN has done a good job over the years of beginning to move more deeply into an identity that does see those deeper points of convergence. And so when the events at Ferguson began to sort of flow this summer, and as we've moved forward, it has seemed to us, particularly, with the intersectional concerns that we are now bearing witness to, that to be here, first through Pamela and a couple of other staff members at RMN, our communications team, to cover it, and then and to sort of show signs of solidarity and the reduction of isolation among marginalized persons, to demonstrate those points of convergence. I don't know if you happen to see the sort of video footage that Pamela took here the last time, where queer people of color actually began to speak about those overlaps and points of convergence. And I think for our movement then to continue to build out our own identity as a movement that extends beyond siloed areas of, white gay men or what have you, that, the more we can do to kind of trace those comparisons and contrasts, then I think the more we're able to give people who are very new to this conversation, who don't have the resources and skills and language, who need to know that we are better together in our various identities, and that not one of us, one of these silos can do the work that we can all do together.
Amen.
And so I'm just, first of all, to have a board member who is, who brings a sort of intellect and acuity capable of piercing the veil that has long existed is one thing I'm grateful for. And then secondly, to have an organization that is committed to its own work and building out its own kind of comprehensive, multi-layered, multifaceted identity as a queer organization. So to sit down with you then, we have a little bit of history, we just haven't figured it out yet. I think it goes back to Kendra, but it's just, there's multiple affinities going on, I'm not sure what it is. To sit down with you then, as an ordained person in the UCC who brings, your queer identity to this work here in Ferguson, is a joyful thing for us, and also is a living witness to what we seek to grow into as an intersectional organization. So I'm just grateful you gave us some time today to kind of sit and think and chat.
Listen, I'm grateful to be in this conversation, and I, like you, I join you in my tremendous admiration and on a very personal level, my pride for the work that Pamela's doing. We have been friends for many years, more years than either one of us going to admit to in this conversation. But, you know, I think what people miss is that most of us don't start off as advocates. And as a decades old friend of Dr. Lightsey's, I can say, you know, she didn't start this way. You know, when we were at ITC, you know, this was not her inclination. And sometimes we'd have conversations, and she'd be like, well, some people got to be out there. You know, she's like, you do that, you know, because at the time I was wrestling with the United Methodist Church and considering whether the closet was safer for me.
Oh, yeah.
And Pamela was saying, no, some people got to be out there, and then some people have to be back here to protect and pay for and manage the bills, so you can be out there. She was like, I'm gonna manage this here part, and you go out there. And so to see the way that her own evolution, spiritually, intellectually, and prophetically, to witness that as a friend and colleague and peer is really remarkable.